Headlines make fans of Zack Snyder's films out to be toxic people who exude reprehensible behavior and have set a dangerous precedent for the film industry. But that just hasn't been my experience.
It's sometimes hard to really enjoy these Zack Snyder DC films because they get crapped on a lot. So it's fun to be around other like-minded people who love these films. They're all people of high quality taste in film.
I've found that fans of Snyder's work can be thoughtful and insightful, and chatting with them provides me with different perspectives that elevate my own personal viewing of the stories. Since I've already shared why I love the cinematic style of Zack Snyder, I wanted to highlight other fans to hear what they love about the work of the visionary filmmaker. We met, I think, for the first time in the line to go in to see Zack Snyder's Justice League in IMAX on the Sunday of the Full Circle event in Burbank/Pasadena. I remember being in that line. We had a long wait. It took us a while to get in there, and I was just striking up some conversations with people while we were in line. And you happened to be one of those people. And I was like, oh my gosh, give me your Vero account. I want to connect with people that I think are cool. Kelsey, I'm so glad that we connected. I've been enjoying following you on Vero. So it's been a lot of fun to see what you're up to now. So I guess one of the things that I'm curious about is what got you into films, liking films, being interested in films. Do you remember a time when it sort of like, there was like an aha moment of like, I really like movies? Do you have anything like that?
Oh yeah, when I was younger, when I was a teenager, I would beg my parents for these special edition DVDs of movies I'd seen in theaters and loved, movies I'd seen on TV, wherever. So I could just sit in front of the TV and watch all the special features over and over and over. I practically ran my Lord of the Rings DVDs out. And
there's a lot of bonus features on those Lord of the Rings DVDs.
There are. And I've practically memorized all of them. So yeah, it was just this curiosity, I guess you could say, of all the moving component parts that are required to create a film. And I knew even at that stage that I wanted to be part of it in some way. So that's where the bug bit me, and it hasn't let up.
That is really cool. I also love a good bonus feature. That's one of the things that makes me sad about physical media not being as big anymore, because we don't get that stuff as much. So I'm glad to know another bonus/special features nerd, because I love them too.
I have to have everything physically.
I agree. You are preaching to the choir. I love physical media. I've been slacking on buying Blu-rays, but people don't understand how Blu-rays are they're superior to streaming and video quality, and it's just a choice Blu-ray is so much better. So I totally agree. In terms of Zack Snyder films, do you remember the first one you saw?
That would have been Watchmen.
Okay, so back in 2009. That's probably also mine. I went back later and watched Dawn of the Dead and 300. But did you know about Zack Snyder before you watched Watchmen, or did you just walk out of the theater and you're like, oh my gosh, who made this movie?
I knew of it. I had known the existence of Dawn of the Dead and 300 before then. They're not quite my arena, my preferred arena genre-wise, so I hadn't seen them up till that point. But I knew of his existence in a kind of removed way. So I said, oh, he's venturing into superhero media. Let's see what this is like.
And when you walked out of Watchmen, what did you think?
I was blown away, because I was already familiar with the comics, and I knew the refrain of, you cannot adapt this. This is impossible to adapt. And I was blown away.
Yeah, same here. My good friend Mike always told me, he was like my comic book guru, and he was like, you have to read Watchmen. And so he knew the movie was coming out, so he gave it to me, and so I watched it. And so when I read the comic, and when I saw the movie, I was like, oh my gosh, it's just like the comic. That's exactly what I imagined in my head and what's on the page. Yeah, I was pretty impressed with Watchmen. Still am to this day. Hopefully you got to see some of the bonus features on the Watchmen stuff, because there's a lot of good stuff on that one as well.
Yep.
what I think is cool is that Watchmen is such a movie that sort of stands the test of time. Sometimes when I go back and look at it now, I'm like, dang, this really holds up. What do you think it is about Zack Snyder films that tend to do that, that tend to maybe be ahead of their time or have a long lasting impact? What do you think that is?
It's the quality of rewatchability. There are so many layers in his filmmaking, visual, story-wise, stylistically, everything. There's so many layers, there's so many Easter eggs, there's so many little moments that you are not gonna catch on the first, the second, the third viewing. You can just keep watching, and every single time, 20 watches down the line, you find something new that you never acknowledged before or you never caught before, and every single time, you're gonna sit back and go, he's done it again. I can do this.
I don't know how he does it, but every time, it just seems to happen that way. Yeah, I think rewatchability is definitely a big part of it because some movies I watch and I'm like, okay, I think I got the gist of that. But his films tend to have a longer lifespan, so I think that's a good reason for that. In terms of his DC stuff, actually, before I ask about his DC stuff, do you have a favorite Zack Snyder film?
Including the DC stuff or
Including the DC stuff, just in general.
oof, including the DC stuff.
Or you could give me, excluding, if that's
Yeah,
easier.
yeah, let's do separate from DC.
Okay.
It's a tough one between Watchmen and Guardians of Ga'Hoole.
Oh, yeah.
Took me completely by surprise. I watched it in full, about 5 or 6 years ago, finally, and I was blown away. I was like, "This beautiful animated film with so much heart to it that no one paid attention to."
The attention to details on the owls and the feather and the animation and the coloring, and it definitely has a Zack Snyder flair to it in
Mhm.
terms of, like, some of the slow motion efforts and the action sequences, but I agree. It's a movie about owls, but it's awesome. I mean, I love owls personally, but it's awesome. If you ever get a chance, there's a 30 Rock episode. I think it's called Double-Edged Sword, and Liz Lemon is stuck on an airplane, and she like can't. They like won't let them off the airplane, and the pilot keeps talking about, "Oh my gosh, have you seen this Guardians of Ga'Hoole movie? It's amazing." So it's really funny to hear that reference in the 30 Rock episode. So it makes my heart happy. But that's a solid choice. That's a really solid choice. That is an underrated film for sure. Um, and so in terms of his DC stuff, do you have a favorite of the
It's gotta be Man of Steel.
Oh, okay.
Man of Steel was so incredibly special to me. It reignited my love for Superman and the entire Superman canon, as it were, and I've loved it ever since. I still have my
Yes. Your Walmart ticket.
my little special ticket from 2013. So,
So did you see it the Thursday before it came out? Do you remember when you
yes, I did. Says Thursday, June 13th.
I did the same thing. In that showing for me, we had some really bad weather, and so it like cut out at one point. I was like, no. That's cool. That's cool that you have that because I have that somewhere in my stuff somewhere. That's cool that you still have that. You are a bona fide, legit, authentic fan. You went to that Thursday night screening for Man of Steel. I actually also thought that was kind of ahead of its time because he had if I remember correctly, they released like as like a special featurette before the screening started. I don't know if that was your experience.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, they really treated that as was a special thing. So I appreciated that. Yeah. So I guess I'm curious because I talk about the Superman family quite a bit for Supergirl Radio, but what was it about Superman that had kind of gotten you down on Superman? And what did Man of Steel do to reignite that for you?
Obviously, there hadn't been any films in quite a bit since Superman Returns fell off, and God bless Brandon. I love Brandon. I thought he did a great job with what he had, but unfortunately, the audience didn't feel the same way. Um, Comics wise, just everything there were no risks being taken. There were no fresh ideas being brought to the table. It was just kind of the same old being recycled. And everyone's going, we need a Chris Reeves clone again. Well, Brandon was that Chris Reeves clone. He was the extension of Chris Reeve. But all of a sudden, we finally got a fresh reboot and a fresh look. And it was exactly what I personally needed in terms of being able to relate to the character.
I also kind of feel that way too. It's weird watching Man of Steel is like it's almost like they made that movie just for me because
How I feel.
you know, or just for Kelsey, really, because it was like the Superman I had always wanted to see, the Lois Lane I had always wanted to see. It was almost like they were taking what I wanted out of my mind and they put it on a screen. So I'm really glad that Man of Steel did that for you because I always liked Superman, but after Man of Steel, I loved Superman. So yeah, I thought that was a fantastic iteration of the Superman mythos, and it's gonna be kind of tough to beat for me personally. I guess I have to ask you while we're talking about Man of Steel because there's a lot of controversial stuff in Man of Steel, and I'm sure, like me, you've probably debated people on these topics. What is your take on Superman snapping Zod's neck?
That is the scenario, the no-win scenario that everyone refuses to put Superman into. The
Yes.
ongoing refrain of Superman always finds a way, Superman always wins, Superman always saves the day. Well, what if he doesn't? He's not all-powerful. He's not. There are limits to his power. And Man of Steel, that's the very beginning of his career as a superhero. He has no idea what he's doing. He's never fought anyone before. He's never been in combat before. He's up against a genocidal soldier, a genocidal general leader of soldiers who has been genetically programmed for that role. He has no other choice. He is backed into a corner. He has two options. He can let the family die, he can let the world die, or he can sacrifice the remaining member of his people.
Yeah, I think that goes back to what you said previously about how Man of Steel took chances where some Superman stories don't. And I think that's a pretty big swing for that. And I think they handled it really well. I don't know about you, but when, after Superman does it and he falls to his knees and he, really cries out that guttural cry, I was like, you know what? That's Superman right there. There he is. He hated to do that, even though he kind of felt like he had to. So I never minded it, but the internet is going to internet. So I'm glad to hear that you have a really thoughtful take on that because some people don't. But I think it's a very mature way to handle that kind of scenario. Because I like the idea that maybe there's something Superman can't do, and maybe he has some not vulnerabilities, I guess, because he's invulnerable, but yeah. So there are limits to him, and the way you get him is through his emotions and his heart, not necessarily, by punching him through a wall or into outer space or something. So I think that's a good way to put that. Now, I guess in terms of the DC stuff, which is what I had talked a lot about on my channel, my YouTube channel. What do you think it is about that universe that they built that was so interesting to you, or was it interesting to you? I guess I shouldn't assume, but but what did you think about the DC universe that he built out of Man of Steel into BVS and then Zack Snyder's Justice League?
It was, again, as we mentioned earlier, it felt like it was made for me. Like, it literally felt like it was tailor-made for me. I am absolutely a nerd. I am a committed nerd. I am a detail-oriented nerd. So canon and coherency is very important to me in my media franchises. And it had everything. It had absolutely everything. It had innumerable layers that you could just peel apart and examine, and everything was connected. There was always coherency. Like, I think my favorite part throughout the entire trilogy is starting off at the finale of the prior film and just saying, by the way, this is the same story ongoing through these separate iterations.
It serves two purposes. It connects everything together, and then it also kind of serves as like a reminder, like this is what happened last time, and this is maybe a different perspective to show somebody else's point of view in that moment. Yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it. And I also enjoy that that you think the I hate to say trilogy because I feel like it was supposed to be so much more. But the trilogy for me, I felt like it was coherent and it was trying to tell a story. So I think that's a good thing to bring up. I also know you're a big Cyborg fan, Ray Fisher fan.
There's the see, yeah, right there. There's the artwork of him and his arc, signed by both Ray and Marv Wolfman.
Nice. So, what is it about Cyborg? I guess just in general as a comic book character, and then also Ray Fisher's portrayal. What is it that you connect with in terms of Victor Stone and Cyborg?
I've never really followed any of his solos or like the Teen Titans stuff. That I knew of him in a kind of removed way, and I always liked how he was performed in the TV series, in the animated films, especially. Oh gosh, I can't remember. Wasn't it Teen Titans versus the Justice League just recently? I
There
think it was
is a
that.
movie I have not just a little confession, I have not watched that one yet, but I know of it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think it was that one. He was portrayed really, really well in that. I really liked that take on him. So when it turned out he was going to be brought into live action in the feature side, not that obviously he was already on the TV side, but on the feature side, I was very curious about how that was going to go, and just the care that was put into this kind of Frankenstein existential human versus machine crisis that I hadn't seen explored before. There was so much attention and care given to it. That was what really came across to me. There was no kind of shallowness to it. There was no kind of, oh no, this isn't really that deep. I promise. There's disability wrapped there. There's this arc of this young man who has gone through all this trauma, but then realizes on the other end of that that he can use what he got out of the trauma and become the best version of himself. And that entire arc is just amazing and done so well.
You know, it's one thing to have somebody overcome their traumatic or their difficult circumstances, but to do it in such a way that he sort of inspires other people and he tries to do stuff for other people and sort of looks outward instead of inward. Because, you know, in the beginning, you know, Cyborg, especially as Ray Fisher portrays him in Zack Snyder's Justice League, he's very inward for some of it, where he's, you know, mad at what's happened to him and rightfully so. But at some point, I think he sort of turns a corner once he realizes, oh, I can actually use this to help people. And I think they did a really good job of making that make sense and getting him to that point. And, you know, it was a really nice character arc that they had for him. So I really like Cyborg. It was I hadn't really connected with Cyborg until I had my double mastectomies because of breast cancer. And I know that sounds weird, but the feeling of, you know, not having some of your body parts anymore because of some difficult circumstance, and that was kind of a strange thing I didn't anticipate when I watched Zack Snyder's Justice League, where I kind of felt connected to him in that way. So Cyborg is just such a good character, and Ray did such a good job of, you talk about the details, just the way he would walk and carry himself, you know, to kind of act like a robot. He had to really use his imagination.
The
But
physicality of his performance was incredible. You can
yeah,
tell he's a stage actor first and foremost. It was incredible. It was just top notch. And
yeah,
yeah, it's all about agency. It's all about reclaiming agency. I totally see the parallels between the two of you as you were talking about. So yeah.
yeah. The physicality for sure. Like I think you're right. He does as a stage actor. I would assume, like, because you don't have special effects and you don't have all that kind of thing, you have to think about how can I make this believable to people. And I think that's a special skill that I don't have. So I appreciate that he could do that.
I got to see him on stage too. I got to see his brief performance here in town, and he was
The Muhammad
as
Ali.
yep, He was as
Cool.
stellar on stage as he was on screen.
Yeah, I can imagine he really, committed to that as well, because that's another physical part. You have to if you're gonna play Muhammad Ali, you gotta look the part and you gotta, be the part. So, that is really cool. I'm actually kind of jealous. That's awesome. So, what did you think about I hate to say this because I never wanna acknowledge that it ended, but what did you think about the ending of Zack Snyder's Justice League and how everything sort of has now just stopped? We don't get the continuation of the nightmare sequence. We don't get to see everything through as it was intended. What did you think about all of that?
There's a lot of complicated feelings about it. Like we deserved what we were promised and then lied to and never delivered on. But what he was able to do with the chance he was given to finally allow his work to be seen was phenomenal. And it was really kind of a it's in your hands now gesture, which is someone who has written fanfic as part of fandom, all that kind of stuff. I personally really appreciate that because getting to see all of my compatriots partaking in that and taking the stories and expanding on them from there is just so rewarding and so touching, and just being able to take it and make it our own now is really important, even if we'll never see any official continuation from there.
So I'm ignorant about this because I haven't been into the fan fiction side of things, but people are writing their own takes about where the story goes on from here.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh, cool. That is awesome. Well, I hope they give Lois Lane good things to do. That would be my preference. But that's awesome. That's good to know that the fandom is still kind of continuing that on, even though it's
Oh yeah,
stopped.
there's
Yeah.
um there's like this VFX artist who's like extending on it and going into the whole Justice League 2, the Nightmare League and everything else, and doing their own like fan films of all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's fantastic. This fandom is full of astoundingly creative people.
That is awesome. If you have links to some of that stuff,
Yeah,
I'd love to see it.
absolutely.
That's really cool. It's sort of
Mr. Vega, I do believe, is his
okay.
handle. So it should be on Instagram and Twitter and
I
a couple other places.
feel like that's familiar, but
Yeah,
I'll have to look at it and see. It
yeah.
sort of reminds me of like the Lucasfilm days. Like after the original Star Wars trilogy, there was that gap between that and the prequels, and fans were making fan films and writing stories, and that was such a creative time for Star Wars fans. So I'm glad to see that that's kind of happening with the Snyderverse. That's really good to know. I'm very impressed with that. Very cool. So I guess with talking about Zack Snyder, what do you think makes him so unique as a filmmaker?
He's instantly recognizable in a visually stylistic sense. It just the scope of everything he does is beyond most other directors. He is a visual storyteller first and foremost. That is his ultimate strength. And he plays to that ultimate strength constantly, which is why he's so good at what he does. So that's it, being that that's kind of his signature. It's instantly recognizable when you go see him, when you go see one of his films, whether it be 300, Watchmen, any of the DC movies, whatever. There's always recognizable visual sequences that everyone references at some point or another because they remember it and it was so visually stunning for them that it's a core memory that then stays with them forever.
Yeah, he's an auteur. He's a film auteur in that way. Yeah, if you're watching a Zack Snyder film when you see one, and I guess that reminds me that I kind of wanted to ask you about this when we were talking about fandom stuff, because one of the recognizable things from like especially the DC Zack Snyder films are the costumes and the wardrobe, and I know I've seen pictures of you cosplaying. So tell me a little bit about that in terms of like your interest in cosplay. First off, how did you get into that? Because I'm always curious about that. Because cosplay, if people don't know, it is difficult. You have to make things. Sometimes you have to spend money. It's a lot of work. So I am always impressed with people who do really good cosplay because I've tried it. It's not been so successful. So first off, how did you get into cosplay? And then also second, why did you want to cosplay Zack Snyder stuff?
So I got into cosplay well over half my life ago, back in my early teens. I attended San Diego Comic-Con for the first time with my dad, who is my con buddy. He goes to pretty much every con I go to and is now kind of the handler for me.
Nice.
How all of my costumes fit together and knows how to fix them if something goes wrong. So um, we went, God, that was like 2009, maybe even before. Back when you could actually get badges and tickets to San Diego instead of going through the Hunger Games. It was very nice back then. And I saw a scattered few people that were cosplaying. It obviously wasn't to the scale and level it is today, but we'll talk about that in a minute. But I saw, I think it was Cap. I think there was a Superman, Batman, just the major ones, the usual major ones. And I just kind of watched them go by, and I said, "That is so cool. I want to do that." And it started out obviously closet cosplaying, just piecing together stuff from my closet and saying, "Oh, this kind of looks like this costume this person wore from this TV show I might want to do." And it escalated from there. And being on the cosplaying side of watching the whole, I don't want to call it an industry, it's not an industry, and especially the influencerization of cosplay
Yeah.
nuts. But watching the evolution of cosplay as a hobby, as an art form, has been mind blowing to me, because here I was way back when pulling stuff out of my closet, and these days you can search someone on the internet, you can search a prop house on the internet, and they can get you a suit with the actual materials that the screen version was made from. It's absolutely nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And being that I have disposable income now, it's a little dangerous, because most of that disposable income goes towards these insane suits that I can get from people. And I'm sure the one I just posted yesterday on Vero was my custom Snyderverse Batwoman. That's not a gender bent Bruce Wayne. That's Batwoman, actually, as in Kate Kane.
Right.
Batwoman. And I went to one of the major costume makers who I think he entered a contest that Zach was putting on circa the release of Justice League and a couple other things. He's been acknowledged a couple times. He got to talk to Michael Wilkinson and Zach about it when he won that little thing. So he is one of the preeminent Snyder cosplay makers. He's really good, and thankfully he's local. So that's just been fantastic, because when I reached out to him and I said, "I want a Snyderverse Batwoman," and he said, "Say less." And instead of having to rely on an overseas prop house or something like that and just giving the near measurements and hoping for the best and crossing your fingers, I literally got to go to his shop 1, 2, 3, 4 separate times to test fit the suit to make sure it fit exactly how it was supposed to. So that was phenomenal. And then when I debuted the suit last year at WonderCon, which is a month from now, this year, it went over fantastically well. Everyone was blown away by it. I personally was blown away by it because it's so insanely well put together. And yeah, that was not my first Snyderverse cosplay. That's my favorite Snyderverse cosplay, just because it's so fun to wear, and Kate is a very special character to me personally. But I also commissioned a Man of Steel suit for a gender bent Clark Kent. So I basically am doing Earth 11. That's what I tell nerds, and in my charity work and everything else, you are the character that the kids say you are. So I am usually Supergirl, and that's totally fine with me. That is fine. That might not be the accurate answer, but that's fine. But yeah, that is a screen printed suit again that is literally the exact same chainmail as the screen used suit. And yeah, it's another insanely well put together suit that I love wearing.
That is so cool. Yeah, because the Superman suit, I saw it in Dallas. They did that AT&T exhibit of
Mhm.
the nightmare stuff, the costumes, and some of the like the props and things. And I went down there, and that was the first time I'd really seen it like really up close. Like you can see pictures, but to see it as up close as I was like, wow, this does look like chainmail. This is really cool. And that's really awesome about the Batwoman Kate Kane suit. I'm curious, how did you go about the design of that? Did you pitch some ideas about like what it should look like, or did he just kind of take the reins?
He'd already done a female more than one female Batfleck suit, so I knew he already had that in his repertoire, and I said, "That's what I want. That's the base. That's what we're going with." Obviously, the Batfleck emblem, everything else. The gauntlets, the fins, the cowl, everything. But I said, obviously, it's Kate Kane. Her whole thing is red and black. That's her costume thing. So I can't really do the original one that you were doing with just Batfleck's color pattern. And so we said, okay, it's going to be a red emblem. Got to be blackwash. Got to be weathered. Got to be damaged a little bit. We said, okay, red gauntlets and keep the fins gold like Batflex are, just because I commissioned custom Batfleck boots from Tilly FX, which is a fantastic prop house that specializes in cosplay boots, mostly superheroes. And I talked to them as well and said, can I customize these? Is that a thing I can possibly do? And they said, sure, let's talk about it. And so I said, okay, what parts can be made red? What can you guys do? And I just kind of approached it in the same sense that Zach tackled the world, and just saying, like, as realistic as possible, what would Kate Kane look like in our world? And that's what I wanted to deliver. So I got the straps towards the back of the boot, like on the side by the ankle, and then over the top of the foot. Those are the only red parts. The rest of it looks exactly like Batfleck's normal boots. It's got the gold steel toe to it, and that's part of the reason that I wanted the gold fins to stay the way they were instead of doing the whole thing red, which I knew in my head wasn't going to look good. So that I kept there. I got a standard Batfleck belt. I think I got it just off Amazon. It wasn't one of the very expensive ones, and repainted it myself, weathered it myself, replaced all of the gold on the little pouches with red. That was all replaced, but left the little canisters gold. So there would be kind of like the gold toes, golden belt, and gold on the fins, just to kind of keep coherent throughout the thing. And like the vibe I wanted to do was like she's stolen a suit belonging to her cousin and retrofitted it herself and made it her own. So that's kind of the vibe that I wanted for it, and it came across perfectly. So I was like, good, done. I'm
That
happy.
makes that makes total sense to me. I think that's definitely something Kit Game would do, and, it sounds like the colors that you used, I think that actually makes a lot of sense. I'm, like, envisioning it in my head as you, describe it. So I think that's really cool. You got to kinda design your own custom. I mean, that's like a one of a kind suit. That's
Yeah,
awesome.
there's like obviously you can commission a character. You can say, I want the Man of Steel Superman suit. I want the BVS Superman suit. Blah blah blah. Tons of people have those. They're all over Instagram, all over everything. They all look great. Y'all are doing a great job. I wanted something that no one else on Earth has and wears, and that is that suit. So it's very special to me. It's very special to me.
I'm super impressed. Please keep wearing it as much as you can, so that people can see it as often as humanly possible. We've talked a lot about cool fan stuff, and in my opinion, you're a great fan. You do all the things that fans should do. You love the things you love. You're excited about it and passionate about it. But we, as Snyderverse fans, have gotten a bad rap, even though we're not part of, I don't think, the bad side of things, but we've been labeled toxic. And I was curious what you made of that labeling of people like us who love these films.
toxicity doesn't come from nowhere. That's the bottom line. It doesn't. I have been in the trenches as a Snyder fan since 2009. I've loved his stuff. I followed his stuff. I was so excited for the DC stuff. It started then. It literally started then. It even started before then. People were already on this boat, circa 300, saying, oh, this dude bro, this frat bro, oh, his movies, oh, they're so bro-y, they're so gross. That was already a widely held opinion on the internet, in Hollywood, etc. And it only got worse from there. It literally only got worse. Then, of course, comes 2017, when their family tragedy occurs. And it just escalates exponentially. You have industry professionals on Twitter, on the internet, celebrating the fact that this man's daughter died, because it means we're gonna get the DC we want. And I'm just sitting on the sidelines going, we're the toxic ones? When y'all are out here behaving like that? And all of a sudden, when we come out and point that out and say, hey, don't do that, that's actually really nasty, all of a sudden they retaliate and say, oh my god, I'm being attacked, oh my god, I'm being swarmed, oh, these toxic fans, oh. And it's like, y'all have been doing this for a decade, and you expect us not to hit back in defense? It doesn't come from nowhere. It has been building for over a decade. And this is the end result. Yes, there are certain Snyderverse fans, if they can even call themselves that, that go too far, are presumably toxic. There's 5 of them, if that, on Twitter. Who cares? Block, mute, ignore, it doesn't matter. But they can't ignore them, because if they do, they're not going to be able to use them as the scapegoat. I would highly recommend anyone who wants like background on why this exists, on why there's toxicity. There is this article, who was it, the mid-side, the attempted spiritual murder of Zack Snyder.
Oh,
it's pretty wild, pretty aggressive there, but it lays out everything with sources, well researched, and explains exactly why we are where we are today.
I think you really laid that out so well, because for fans like us, we just like talking about the movies. We just like being in the fandom and having a good time. And what I always experienced was I didn't see it as much back in 2009, but I do not doubt that it was there. I do remember people harshing on Watchmen because I guess they thought it was edgy or whatever. And but I noticed it more fully when Man of Steel came out.
Mhm.
That was when, for me, the crap hit the fan, because it was just like I couldn't go anywhere and just enjoy the film, or just have a good time with it. It was someone always crapping on it, someone always either putting me down for enjoying it, for liking it, for thinking I was less of a Superman fan because I enjoyed it. I saw a lot of that, and it did, as you said, it got progressively worse. By the time BBS came out, forget it. It was over. I mean, it was awful. It got to the point where I had to leave Twitter, because I was like, I can't do this anymore.
And that's the other thing about calling us toxic. There is no other fan base, there is no other franchise to be a fan of where people take it so personally and make the attacks so personal. It immediately goes personal, instead of just being, oh, MCU fans, oh, Star Wars fans, oh. It gets intensely personal right off the bat. And it's like, so we aren't supposed to defend ourselves when people are calling us racists or sexist or Nazis or whatever their favorite buzzword of the day is? So we're just supposed to sit here and take it? And be labeled as toxic while sitting here and taking it? No one else has to do that. No one else gets that label. It's just a very odd confluence of nerddom, we'll say.
In my experience, I haven't seen other fandoms have to deal with this as much. I know the Star Wars fans have a lot of varying opinions on the Star Wars universe, but it never goes to that dark place. It always it's always out of a love for Star Wars, and at least this is what I've seen when I go to conventions and
Yeah.
talk to other fans. It always seems to there's a common connection that they love Star Wars, but they just oh, I hate the prequels or whatever they say. But with this, it's like if you like Zack Snyder movies, you are a this. That's
Mhm,
that's what it
mhm.
is. And it's like, no, maybe I just like some movies. Maybe
You're
maybe that's all it is.
fascist, you're this, you're that, and it's like, the guy literally came out stumping for Biden 4 years ago. Like, he's not a Nazi, he's not a fascist, his art is not fascist. If you guys are so intensely fixated on reading it that way, maybe look inside, maybe look internally, because that's not our problem.
Calling Zack Snyder a fascist is so mind-blowing to me because fascism basically is the attempt to shut down your political opponents. And Zack Snyder is very famous for just letting people say whatever they want to about him. Like, he's like, hey, if that's your opinion, okay, fine. Except for that one time he went after I think it was Scott Mendelson, but
Yeah.
but Scott Mendelson, he maybe asked for it because he commented on a leaked trailer, so that was kind of bad form from him. So that was the only time I've ever seen Zach kind of snark back at somebody.
It wasn't even, like, criticizing anyone, it was just like, "Oh, here's a snarky little comeback.
Yeah,
Bye."
and I think he also said something kind of derogatory about the Zack Snyder's Justice League trailer, and it was just like,
Yeah.
dude, stop. Like this maybe not is not for you.
When it gets to the point of industry professionals partaking in all the bullshit,
Unprofessional.
mm-mm.
Yeah, I think they should know better. And this leads into my next question. What do you think about the film criticism? If you've read it at all or know about some of the criticisms about these films, what do you think about that? And then I guess my second question is, how do you evaluate films and determine if they are good or bad, or do you at all?
When it comes to film criticism of Zack's films, specifically the Snyderverse DC films, I am very wary of taking anything at face value just because so much of the criticism is simply targeting Zack personally as a human, not even a director, but as a person, as a human. So as soon as the second sentence of the review skews in that direction, I go, well, this is useless. I don't have to listen to it, and X out and pay no attention to it. But if you're actually going to commit to film criticism, when I was in college, there was an entire concentration that you could go to in your major. I didn't go that route. I went the production route, but that you could follow to become a film critic. That was an option, and you could follow that entire track and go in and figure out how to evaluate films at a professional level. That's 75% of the time, that is not what people do with Zack Snyder products, and that's just not what I feel like engaging with because there's zero good faith efforts out there. It's just all personal attacks for absolutely no reason. My eternal question is always, what has he done to you?
Yeah,
That's
they act like he like murdered their grandmother or something. It's
exactly. It's like
crazy.
Zack Snyder murdered my grandma. Duh. It's like, he did?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're actually going to commit in good faith to reviewing and criticizing the films, I am all for it. I will hop on there with you. I will go back and forth with you and see what your opinions are versus my opinions. What could be done better? What wasn't done well enough, etc., etc. But it has to be done in good faith. It has to. That is the crux of it all. If it's not, I have no interest in it. And more broadly, getting outside of Zack, outside of the Snyderverse, outside of DC, the whole thing about films, film, TV, etc., it's art. And art is subjective. It is entirely 100% subjective. That's why people who take the objective tact and say, this is objectively bad, this is objectively this is objectively that, that's not criticism. That's your very personal evaluation of that piece of art, which is valid, which is totally valid. I will say that up front. But unfortunately, you can't come out here on your soapbox and say these things objectively and expect everyone to agree with you, because that's not what art is. Art is entirely subjective, and every single person is going to have a different experience, having watched it, having read it, having heard it, having whatever. So the criticism, if you're going into criticism of film, TV, whatever, you have to go into it knowing that it's subjective and say, oh, this element didn't really work for me, but it might work for other people. I'm not sure. It just didn't land for me, so I didn't think it was that good. Or on the other side, you go, this film did this so good. It also did this so good. I thought it was just fantastic. I can't wait to watch it again. Zero consensus with their compatriots, with other reviewers. That's fine. That's fine. But in terms of aggregators like Rotten Tomatoes, let's say, our favorite one, we come to find out just end of last year that everybody was being paid off for certain reviews, and
I'm
we've
so
all known
shocked.
that. We've all said that from day one, but no one wanted to listen because their favorite franchise was getting all the good reviews, and so all of that kind of stuff, pointless. It's another popularity contest. So if you want me to engage with your criticism, engage with your reviews, listen to your reviews, you need to step outside the popularity contest and actually engage with it in good faith and say, I'm going to watch this movie. I'm going to see what it did right, what it did poorly, what it did well, what I really enjoyed about it, what I didn't enjoy about it, and evaluate it accordingly. There you go. I will totally listen to you. But if you're going to go on Rotten Tomatoes and get paid off for a good review of blah, 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 nope.
Yeah, I think doing it in good faith is such a good thing to point out because I've read a lot of reviews specifically about Batman v Superman where it was just nasty stuff. I mean, I couldn't believe some of the stuff they were writing personally about Zack Snyder, about Ben Affleck, about some other actors in the films, and I was so shocked by how unprofessional they were and how they didn't even seem to want to give the film a chance at all. And so I think that's a really good thing to point out that if you want to review a film and have somebody read your review and even care about it, do it in good faith. Actually, take the film at its merit and look at the whole of the film, not just the parts that you dislike about it, but what it was trying to do. I think that's a really good thing to point out. I think, and this is just my personal opinion, but I think you can add an objective part into art where this is what I do. I have like an objective standard, like a list of things that I'm looking for. I'm looking for cinematography, direction, score. I have this list of things where I'm like, okay, this is my range of things, that my barometer of things that I think. So in that sense, I think of it like an objective thing. Like I review everything based on this criteria. And then after that, it's subjective. Do I think it, met a high bar for that, or did it sort of fail? Was it a little subpar on that? So to me, there's an element of both, but I totally get what you're saying about how a lot of times it's just, did you think it was good or did you think it was bad? And somebody else might think it was good and somebody else might think it was bad. So in that part, I do agree on that. And I guess that you sort of answered my final question, but I'm curious if you have any additional thoughts, because it's a question. It's a very difficult question, but I've been pondering it personally and I'm trying to ask what other people think about it. But if you had to define art, how do you think you would do that?
What is art?
It's a big question.
It's such a massive existential question. What is art? Boy, and especially given the state of the industry right now, that's a very hot question. Art is something you want to share with an audience, whether that is an experience, whether that is a message, whether it's a metaphor, whether it's an anecdote, a personal story, a story you were told. It has to be something you want to share with people. That is what art is to me. If there's nothing you're trying to share, if there's nothing you're trying to communicate, if it's just this 2D thing to look at, that's not really art to me. It has to be, and it can be as outlandish and out there as possible, regardless of the medium, film, TV, art, whatever. But art itself, there has to be something behind it. There has to be intention behind it, an intention to its creation for it to be art. Otherwise, it's nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing to look at.
I think that's such an interesting answer because if I think about that, if I'm creating something, if I'm shooting and editing a video or something, and I do it just for me, that's fine, I guess. You know, I could make something just for me, but what's kind of the point of making something just for me? Why wouldn't I want to share it with other people? If I make it, if I put all this effort into it, if you make that cool Batwoman suit, you know, you could just walk around your house wearing it. That's totally fine, but it's better when you go outside and people get to see how cool it is. So I think that is a really interesting way to think about it, because like you can make something on your own, but there's nobody to see it other than you. So I like that perspective of sharing it, and because I think all art really should be shared. Just because if it's made with care and love, then maybe it's would mean something to someone else. I really appreciate this. It was really fun to hear your perspective, and I guess I'll see you on Vero.
You absolutely will. I'll probably be talking about my recent feature in Cosplay Alliance with that exact suit, actually.
I did see something you posted one time. I was like, oh, got into a published magazine here. All right.
Let's see.
That's
so
awesome.
I have 2 right now, actually.
Ooh. Okay.
No, there we go. It's the Pride issue from last year, and then the end of 2023.
Dude,
And then a third one, actually, with the Batwoman suit. I don't have a physical version of that one yet, but it was just a single. These 2 were like full features, like a bio feature, and I got to include a bunch of different characters that I cosplay. But the third one is just in my Batwoman cosplay. It was just a single page. It was like your name, your handle, where you're from, how long you've been cosplaying, and the 4 pictures are from the same photographer that I worked with at WonderCon last year. And
that's so cool.
Stairwell shots that I will be posting.
I appreciate when people have a passion for something and they're really good at it and they get highlighted and recognized. So that's great. Well,
this cosplayer is not where I thought I'd ever be, but there you go.
Hey, you know, I always tell people sometimes it's your hobbies that get you to your next chapter. Never downplay your hobbies and your passions. They could be useful in the future. So that's awesome. Well, thank you for spending your time with me. I'll let you go.
Fantastic.
Cool.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. This is great.
All right. Well, yeah, I had a good time, and I'm glad you had a good time as well.
Thank you.